Hi everyone, it's Miss Rossi. Today we're going to create a city using shapes. What you'll be needing today is your Shape City papers from your art folder. This should have a large blue paper, which will be our background paper, a nice big white piece of paper, and then some smaller black and white papers. Now the only paper we need today is our big white one. So I am just going to carefully tear that from my staple, and I'm going to put the rest of my papers back in my art folder because I won't need these until next week. Along with my papers, I also need some crayons to add some color today, and I also have some watercolors here because I'm going to do a watercolor and crayon resist. Now if you don't have watercolors at home, you can color your whole picture in using crayons or markers or whatever else you might have at home to use. What we're going to make today is a nice bright colorful paper we can cut up to turn into the houses of our Shape City. So I am going to start using my crayons and adding some details and decorations on my white paper. Now next week we're going to cut up this paper, so I don't want to draw houses or anything on here because we're going to make those using our scissors. So all I want is to create a nice bright colorful, fun, decorated paper that I can use as the background for my houses. So I am just going to start using my crayons to draw decorations and details using different kinds of shapes. So with my crayons, I'm just going to practice drawing some of my favorite shapes. Let's see what kinds of shapes you remember. I have a triangle, which is a three-sided shape where each side meets at a point. I also remember our squares from last time and some circles. We also saw some rectangles, maybe even some ovals. What other kinds of shapes do you remember? There's so many different kinds of shapes we can draw. So I'm just going to go in and draw all different shapes using my crayons. Now I am pressing firmly with my crayon, meaning I am pushing down hard enough where my color is nice and bright on my paper. Since we're going to paint over the top of this with our watercolors, we want to make sure our crayon is nice and dark so it shows through once we add paint. I can draw some shapes that are overlapping other shapes. I just want to make sure that my whole paper is filled in with all of these fun and colorful shapes that I know how to draw. Ooh, maybe even a heart. That's another good shape. So try and see how many different kinds of shapes you can draw on your paper using your crayons. Now your shapes don't need to turn into anything. They could be all different sizes. They can overlap. There can be smaller shapes inside larger shapes. It's really up to you how you want to create this abstract picture that we're using to start. All right, that looks pretty good. I filled up a lot of my paper with all different kinds of shapes. I used all different colors. I had them overlapping and repeating over and over again all across my paper to create a nice abstract design. I think I created a nice assortment of all different kinds of shapes on my paper. Now with my crayons, I am just going to go in and color in certain areas of certain shapes so they are nice and filled in. I'm not going to color in all of my shapes because I am going to use some watercolor paint today to fill in the rest of my background, but I think I want some of my shapes colored in. You can decide what you want to keep colored in and what you want to keep just as an outline of the shape. It's totally up to you. All right, I think that looks good. I colored in some of my shapes here and there, and I left some of them blank. But now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use some watercolor to fill in all the rest of the white space. Now, since we used crayon, when we're using watercolor, now crayons and watercolors don't mix together because crayons are made of wax and water don't mix. So wherever I put crayon on my paper, my watercolor is not going to show up in those spaces. Our watercolor will just move around to fill in any of the white space that is left. So I'm going to put my crayons away for now, and with my watercolors, I am just going to fill in the rest of my paper. I'm going to use my watercolors almost to create a nice tie-dye effect, mixing different colors together to fill in the rest of my space. Now when we're using watercolor paint, we want to make sure we wet our brush, wipe it off on the side, and then dip right into whatever color we would like to use. We want to swirl our brush nice and carefully in our paint. We don't want to jam it in there because that's going to hurt our brush. We want to make sure our brush's tip stays nice and pointy, so we have to be very careful with it. Now I'm just going to use my paints to fill in the rest of my paper. So I'm painting right over the top of my designs, and you can see even though I used green paint in that area, I can still see the yellow and the blue crayon that were there when I started. And this is going to show up all over the place. Wherever I try and paint over the top of my crayon is going to push that watercolor away, and I will be able to still see all of those cool designs that I drew. As I'm jumping between different colors of watercolor paint, I'm making sure that I am washing my paintbrush in the water so I don't mix my colors together on the tray. It's a lot of fun to mix our watercolor paints together, but it's best to do that on our paper so our tray stays nice and clean and our colors stay nice and bright in there. So I'm just going to go in with all different colors and fill in the rest of my paper so there is no more white space left. You can color yours in however you would like. It is totally up to you. If you do not have watercolor paints at home, you can use some more crayons to fill in the rest of your background. You can use markers or whatever else you would like to use to add color. We just want to make sure we have a nice colorful paper left that we can use next week when we turn it into a colorful shape city. And that's my paper all filled in. So I made sure to go in and fill in all of the white space that I could still see. And as you can see on my own paper, all of my little crayon designs that I drew already are still shining through my watercolors since they resisted them. Now we're going to let these papers dry until next week when we're going to cut it up and turn it into our shape city. Make sure you keep your paper in a safe place so we can use it next week. Since we're going to be finishing our project then, you do not need to send in an assignment today. Just make sure you keep your papers in a safe place until next time. Try your best, have fun, and get creative. I'll see you then. Bye!